Number 10. UFO Sightings. A newly released CIA intelligence report gives a new look into a nearly 50-year-old UFO mystery, providing facts acquired from an experimental missile range in modern-day Kazakhstan. The report covers not just unexplained aerial phenomena, UAP, but also rumors of laser weaponry from the Cold War. The UFO incident happened in 1973 and was first shown to the public in a 1978 CIA intelligence information report. The declassified version of the paper, though heavily censored, has a single line documenting contact with a UFO at a place known as Site 7. The UFO sighting took place in the summer, around dusk, and the witnesses saw an unidentifiable bright green circular mass in the sky. They thought the object was floating above cloud level, despite the fact that the sky was clear at the time of this incident. The witness was unable to estimate the diameter of the object. The green circle enlarged after 10 to 15 seconds, and multiple spiral rings developed around it in a short amount of time. The color was gone in minutes. There was no sound connected to the incident, like an explosion. But after a request for a mandatory declassification review by the Black Vault researcher John Greenwald, a site specializing in declassified government records, the CIA revealed a more thorough image of the encounter that was documented in a lengthy intelligence report. Site 7, where the UFO encounter occurred, was home to the Warhead Checking Unit, as well as a garrison of Soviet Air Force soldiers. While the sighting is less well known in American research circles, it is one of several contacts made with unidentified aircraft phenomenon encircling Soviet military sites during the Cold War, comparable to the inexplicable phenomena documented by the US military today. Number 9. Project Iceworm. Project Iceworm was a covert Cold War effort conducted by the United States to design missile launch sites beneath the ice in Greenland. The goal was to excavate 2,500 miles of tunnels to store and possibly launch 600 nuclear missiles. Greenland was a desirable location thanks to its proximity to Russia, but this also increased the danger of the project. It was kept hidden from Denmark, which Greenland is part of, but you can't expect no one to notice if you drill thousands of kilometers through ice. As a cover, the US Army claimed to be constructing Camp Century, a Danish-approved research center. It was built in 1960 near Thule Air Base, claiming it would study construction processes and conduct scientific experiments in Arctic conditions. In reality, the underground research center provided a reason for the US to excavate and place missiles. Camp Century was a diversion, but it wasn't completely meaningless. Scientists were able to investigate thousands of years of climactic history by digging deep into the nearby ice. They were also able to go back in time by inspecting germs trapped in the melting glacier water. People lived and worked there year-round. The underground camp had a church, a theater, and even a hobby store, all located in weaving tunnels similar to an ant colony. The world's first transportable nuclear reactor, which was constructed elsewhere and then moved to the deep snow caverns, provided all of the electricity. Despite the use of typical building materials like wood and steel, the majority of the tunnels were simply ice. They planned to survive 10 years without major maintenance, but the glaciers were advancing quicker than projected, rendering the camp useless. It was vacated, used sparingly for a few years, then finally completely decommissioned in 1967. Constant snowfall and falling glaciers were of great concern to the US military since they thought the ice would hide the research station. In 2016, an analysis was conducted and discovered global warming was causing the ice sheet to melt, and the facility would be unveiled by the end of the century, if not sooner. Number 8. Acoustic Kitty. Acoustic Kitty was a CIA project started in the 1960s by the Central Intelligence Agency to employ cats to spy on the Kremlin and Soviet embassies. A veterinary surgeon inserted a microphone inside cat's ear canal, a tiny radio transmitter at the base of its skull, and a thin wire into its fur during an hour-long surgery. This was supposed to let the cat capture and transfer sound from its surroundings discreetly. Because of distraction issues, the cat's appetite had to be addressed in another procedure. According to Victor Marchetti, a former CIA official, Project Acoustic Kitty cost about $20 million. Acoustic Kitty's first assignment was to listen in on two men in a park near the Soviet embassy in Washington, D.C. The cat was placed nearby, but was almost immediately hit and killed by a car. But in 2013, Robert Wallace, a former director of the CIA's Office of Technical Service, disputed this, claiming that the project was dismissed due to the complication of training a cat to behave. He said that the equipment was taken out of the cat was resewn for a second time, and lived a long and happy life afterwards. The project was labeled a failure and complete loss. In 1967, the operation was cancelled completely. CIA researchers thought they could train cats to go short distances, but they said the environmental and security issues in utilizing this approach in a true international setting led us to conclude that, for our intelligent purposes, it would not be viable, according to a closing note. When CIA documents were released in 2001, the project was revealed to the public. Number 7. Project Horizon. Project Horizon was a 1959 study done to evaluate the possibility of creating a facility on the Moon, at a period when the United States Departments of the Army, Navy, and Air Force were in charge of space program initiatives. On June 8, 1959, the Army Ballistic Missile Agency, ABMA, published a study for the Army called Project Horizon, a U.S. Army study for the establishment of a lunar military outpost. Project Horizon suggested the lunar outpost be used to establish and protect prospective U.S. interests on the Moon, to create techniques for surveillance of the Earth and space, for research operations on the Moon's surface, to serve as a foundation for Moon exploration, deeper exploration into space, and military operations on the Moon if necessary. They believe the $6 billion permanent outpost would be needed for national security as soon as practicable. With 12 troops, the planned operating date was December 1966, but Horizon was rejected by President Dwight Eisenhower when the major responsibility for America's space program was passed to the civilian organization NASA. Horizon was predicted to need 147 early Saturn A1 rocket flights to transport enough spaceship parts into low Earth orbit for assembly at a spent tank space station. A lunar landing and return spacecraft launched by a Saturn A2 would have transported 16 people to and from the base. The direct ascent lunar mission requirement called for a 12 million pound thrust super booster, which could not possibly be completed in time for the 1966 deployment goal. The project wasn't viable at the time, so it was scrapped. Number 6. Operation Northwoods. Operation Northwoods was a proposed false flag operation against American civilians that began at the United States Department of Defense in 1962. The details instructed CIA agents to plan and carry out terrorist attacks on American military and civilian targets, then blame the Cuban government for the attacks, so a war against Cuba would be justified. The memo outlined the possibility of assassinating Cuban immigrants, sinking boats carrying Cuban refugees, hijacking planes, blowing up a U.S. ship, and staging violent terrorism in U.S. cities. President John F. Kennedy thankfully rejected these suggestions. The military's worry from the Cold War prompted Fidel Castro to take power in Cuba in 1959 and led communists into the new Cuban government, nationalizing American firms and increasing connections with the Soviet Union, provoking the military's worry. The program intended to gain public support for a war against Cuba by blaming the country for terrorist attacks committed by the U.S. government. The Joint Chiefs of Staff prepared the proposal, which was signed by Chairman Lyman Lemnitzer and delivered to the Secretary of Defense. Despite being part of the U.S. government's anti-communist Cuban project, Operation Northwoods was never actually sanctioned. It was authorized by the Joint Chiefs of Staff, but later rejected by President Kennedy. Under the confines of Operation Northwoods' ideas, none of the proposed false flag activities have officially launched. Number 5. Project Blue Book. From March 1952 through December 17, 1969, Project Blue Book was the codename for the United States Air Force's comprehensive examination of UFOs. The operation, based at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, was first supervised by Captain Edward J. Rappelt. It followed projects like Project Sign, which began in 1947, and Project Grudge in 1948. Blue Book had two goals: evaluate if UFOs posed a threat to national security, and conduct scientific analysis of UFO-related material. Tons of UFO reports were gathered, investigated, and filed. The project was cancelled in 1969 after the Condon Report, which indicated studying UFOs was unlikely to generate any scientific breakthroughs, and a review of the report by the National Academy of Sciences went public. Project Blue Book collected 12,618 UFO claims by the time it decided that the majority of them were just misidentifications of natural phenomena, clouds, stars, etc., or conventional aircraft. According to the National Spy Office, a number of the reports could be explained by test flights of the formerly secret reconnaissance planes U-2 and A-12. Even after an in-depth investigation, though, 701 complaints were categorized as unexplained. The UFO reports have been stored and are available under the Freedom Information Act, but all witnesses' names and other personal information have since been removed. Is it possible that out of those 701 unexplained complaints, there could be evidence of an actual UFO? Tell us what you think in the comments, and hit subscribe while you're at it. Number 4. Operation Washtub. The United States Air Force's Office of Special Investigations and the FBI collaborated on Operation Washtub, or STAGE, Stay Behind Agent Program. Its goal was to establish an intelligence network in case the Soviet Union attacked and gain control of Alaska. The operation, which was conceived by J. Edgar Hoover and his then protege Joseph Carroll, DIA, operated for 8 years from 1951 through 1959, when Alaska was awarded statehood. The major goals of Operation Washtub were to cultivate possible stay-behind agents for secret intelligence gathering, as well as to preserve evasion and escape facilities for captured American forces. The FBI sharply stopped its engagement in September 1951 for reasons that have not been revealed in released FBI documents. Communications from that time period indicate that Director Hoover ordered the FBI to get out immediately, fearing public shaming if an invasion happened. This indicated that the Air Force Office of Special Investigations was responsible for almost the entirety of the operation's execution. For this mission, the agents were given 30-06 rifles with 4 scopes, a small caliber handgun with Maxim silencer, a camera, a climbing rope, and several other items provided by the government. The second component of the operation was an escape and evasion strategy for crashed American planes, which included supply caches for all branches of the U.S. military. Throughout the operation, agents were paid a base salary of $3,000 per year, which they were told would increase after the invasion began. At the conclusion of the operation, 89 agents were assumed to be in different locations, specified in the official document. The operation was eventually called off due to the difficulties of keeping the agency's finances and feeding the caches in the harsh Alaskan weather. Number 3. Project MKUltra. The code name for the semi-legal human testing program developed and carried out by the United States CIA was Project MKUltra. The studies were designed to establish processes and identify chemicals like LSD that could be used during interrogations to weaken people and force confessions through brainwashing and psychological torture techniques. MKUltra utilized a variety of methods to manipulate its subjects' psychological states and brain functions, including secretive administration of high doses of psychoactive drugs like LSD and other chemicals. Electroshocks, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, isolation, verbal and sexual abuse, among other torture methods, were also used. It started in 1953, was scaled back in 1964 and 1967, and finally ended in 1973. It coordinated with the United States Army Biological Warfare Laboratories and was organized by the CIA's Office of Scientific Intelligence. The project participated in unlawful acts, like the exploitation of unknowing American and Canadian residents as their test subjects. MKUltra's reach was vast, with disguised research at over 80 institutions, including colleges, universities, hospitals, jails, and pharmaceutical businesses. Although some high executives at these places were aware of the CIA's involvement, the CIA worked through front associations. The Church Committee of the United States Congress and Gerald Ford's United States President's Commission on CIA Activities in the United States officially brought MKUltra to public knowledge in 1975. The Church Committee and Rockefeller Commission investigations relied on sworn testimony from direct participants of the project and a small number of documents that managed to escape CIA Director Richard Helms's order to destroy all MKUltra files in 1973, after which the investigations were hindered. A Freedom of Information Act request in 1977 unveiled a stockpile of 20,000 files connected to MKUltra, prompting Senate hearings. In July 2001, the remaining MKUltra information was declassified to the public. Number 2. Operation Mockingbird. Operation Mockingbird was an alleged large-scale initiative launched by the CIA in the 1950s that hired American journalists to take part in a propaganda network. The CIA told the journalists to produce phony pieces that endorsed the spy agency's viewpoints. Student cultural organizations and journals were purposefully sponsored as fronts for this operation. Journalists were allegedly blackmailed and coerced into participating as well. In a 1977 magazine article titled "The CIA and the Media," it is stated by one of the journalists that the CIA secretly bankrolled foreign press agencies, magazines, and newspapers. This offered an incredible cover for CIA employees. After these allegations, a number of legislative investigations were conducted in the 1970s by the Church Committee, a group established by the U.S. Senate. The Church Committee investigations looked into government activities and suspected abuses carried out by the CIA, NSA, FBI, and even the IRS. The CIA declassified and released over 700 pages of records from the 1970s in a compilation named The Family Jewels in 2007. These files were about investigations and controversies involving agency corruption in the 1970s. There was just one reference to Operation Mockingbird in these papers, and it was disclosed that 2 American journalists were wiretapped for a period of months. Number 1. Ghost Army. During World War II, the Ghost Army was a strategically deceptive organization of the United States Army, formerly known as the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops. This 1,100-man force was assigned to a unique duty within the Allied Army: to fool the enemy by impersonating other Allied Army formations. They were first utilized in combat against the opponent on the evening of June 6, 1944, D-Day, when they landed in Normandy with the First Army. The regiment was on its way home by June 23, 1945, after serving with 4 U.S. armies in England, France, Luxembourg, Belgium, Holland, and Germany. They oversaw nearly 20 combat deceptions, working close to the front lines. Ghost soldiers were urged to utilize intelligence and their ability to deceive, confuse, and mislead the German army. Several were hired from art schools, marketing companies, and other jobs that put emphasis on creativity. In normal life, ghost soldiers worked as painters, architects, performers, stage designers, or engineers. Even though the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops consisted of only 1,100 men, it employed British-developed technology like dummy tanks and artillery, fake planes, and gigantic speakers blaring the sounds of infantry and guns to fool Germans into thinking it was a 2-division, 30,000-man force. The intricate plots they employed assisted in diverting German soldiers away from the sites of bigger Allied battle units. Their narrative remained a closely guarded secret for over 50 years after the war, until it was declassified in 1996. Have you heard of any other declassified government projects? Tell us in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. Bye!